Welcome back to our story. It's me and Darren. We're talking about, we left off with Aunt Judy.
Oh, in Abilene.
And so we
Yeah.
had been going to AA for a couple, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. And then we had to go take care of the dog.
Yeah. So, like I said, my Aunt Judy's in Abilene, about 3 hours away from here. Uh, Anytime she needed to go out of town for, she'd like to go on women's golf outings or things like that. I would go over there and take care of her sweet dog, and basically stay, a weekend, sometimes a week.
Dixie.
Yeah, Dixie dog. And the reason why I did that is because my aunt uh, helped my mother. Moved my mother. Long story short, I moved my mother down from Iowa to Abilene in her last couple of years battling cancer. And obviously they were sisters, and so I felt like I owed a lot to my aunt, and and she was like a mother to me, regardless. And so anytime Judy called, I usually answered the bell. Well, she called and needed our help. And, most of the time I did it without Tasha. Well, this time I was doing it with Tasha. So we drive over to Abilene, Texas, and
I was so glad you were going to take me somewhere.
poor thing. But anyway, we go there and the weather comes in. West Texas weather comes in. It's wintertime.
It
And here comes
snowed.
snow, sleet, and ice.
Ice. Bad.
And we are stuck in a house in Abilene. Uh, at that time, they maybe had two guys that door dashed, and
Couldn't get a pizza.
couldn't get a pizza. Yeah,
I couldn't
couldn't.
get anything.
Domino's,
There
nothing,
was nothing for 5 days.
nothing. But my aunt, uh, she had a wall full of alcohol, every liquor item you could think of, from beer to whiskey to
There
wine.
wasn't a lot of food in the house, but there was
We have
plenty to
plenty.
drink.
So, what Natasha and I do, stupidly, boom.
I mean, we maybe lasted a day or two, but
Oh, I'm
I don't
not.
know.
Oh, a day or two sober? Yeah, yeah,
But then when we
maybe.
realized we were trapped, it was over.
Yeah, it was over. So, we started, you know how it goes. One drink, it probably lasts an hour. Quickly, we're up to 20, or whatever that number might have been.
I don't
And,
know if I ever hit
uh,
20, but
well, if it depends if you're counting a double as one or two.
yeah, it depends.
Yeah, you all know. But anyway, as predicted,
I'm
start
also
up.
not sure that I ever could stay on one drink for 1 hour, Darren. I think I had three doubles in an hour. That was probably my standard.
I like to make myself feel good.
Okay.
so, so anyway, we went on pretty much a drinking binge. We would start when we woke up, uh,
Drink
getting
all
a
day,
drink all day, getting a big fight
get in a big
about God
fight,
knows whatever, and go to sleep. Wake up the next day,
start all over
start all
again.
over. And I think we were there for about a week, but
This is Diet Dr. Pepper.
and I might have my days off, but I want to say on the fifth day, and it could have been the fourth, could have been the sixth, but it doesn't matter. On the fifth day, I woke up and I'm like, I'm done with this. My stress and anxiety started hitting me because I knew we were going to start drinking, get in a bad fight, and I literally in my mind just had enough, and I did not want to do it anymore. I just literally did not want to do it anymore, and because up until Abilene, things were moving along quite nicely, really.
Yeah, we were going to AA every morning
Yeah,
together.
we were happy, and
It was going well.
the kids were doing okay, and everything was going well. And I was like, oh, this is what they call the which you had a lot of experience with, the
Honeymoon phase of sobriety.
well, the what do you call it, the relapse,
Yeah.
the relapse, and this is really my first relapse. Um, of you know, and I was like, I don't want to drink anymore. I just hate it, and I hate it. I hate fighting with her. I hate fighting with anybody.
You're not
Uh,
the same person.
no,
You know, you're not yourself. You're not sweet. You're not
no.
nice. You're not anything. Nothing good comes out of it. And we had gotten in a fight so bad that I had packed up my suitcase and decided I was going to call an Uber to come get me in Abilene, Texas, take me back to Dallas. And I was
A 3 hour
leaving.
drive.
And I went out to the,
I
I
forgot.
rolled my suitcase outside to the ice. And he's like, "Where are you going?"
Okay.
I'm calling an
If you see
Uber. I'm
me
getting you
rolling
out
my
of
eyes, and
here.
because that's exactly what I was doing at that time. I'm like, you're not going anywhere. I
So
said,
he stopped a couple of days before me. And
yeah,
then we went to Perini's Steakhouse and got sober
yeah,
and drove home. And that was February 22nd and 23rd, or
21st
21st and 23rd.
yeah,
So he started 2 days.
of 2018. So yeah, I decided I'm tired. I told her that day that I'm not drinking anymore. Well, she wasn't quite ready, so she drank for 2 more days, and picked a fight with me, of
We were
course.
in two separate rooms watching TV. We weren't visiting,
No.
hanging out. It was miserable.
And I think God stepped in right then and there, because I don't think Tasha really remembers this, but on the way out, we're finally able to get out of the Abilene. My aunt comes back, dog's okay, everything. She was just light of quite a bit of liquor at the time, because we pretty
No,
much.
we stopped together and went to Perini's because I remember having the anxiety at Perini's.
Oh yeah, well on the way, you're right. So, by the way, you forget. There's a lot of stuff that you remember at a much later date, even after being years of sober.
Yeah.
Um, like
But
that, for example.
anxiety for days.
Yeah, for
Your
days.
anxiety is worse after you drink.
Well, and here's what I don't think you remember going along that. So we're driving home, and Tasha says out of the blue, she goes, "That's it. I'm done drinking." She decided for that she had the conversation with herself, even though I was there, that I had 2 days before, and so we're back in AA, um, um, and you know, knock on wood, I have never touched a drink since, and she hasn't either. And and life's been really good. Don't get me wrong; it hadn't been perfect, um, but the stress level is pretty much gone. Although my stress that I have now is more, typical stuff, work related, economy related, politically related, whatever you want to call it. I'm not going to get
Yahoo
political.
related.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The Yahoos you got to deal with.
That you got to deal with, but you know, I think what I'm afraid of I'm doing right now is that I'm making it sound like it was really easy.
It was not
Yeah,
easy. It
it was
was
definitely
hard.
not easy.
But it was a pivotal moment when you were willing to get sober
Yep.
that I decided this might work.
Yep.
We
And I
might be
decided
able
the same
to.
thing.
We both secretly knew that and thought that if we kept drinking, we weren't going to make it. We were going
Mm-mm.
to have to figure something else out. But when we were both going to get sober, that we might be able to get married. So it
Uh,
was pretty short after we got sober that we got engaged.
well, yeah, I mean, because really, and now I'm looking back, thinking about it now. When she made that comment in the car, I'm pretty sure I was thinking prior to that, coming back from Abilene to Dallas, I'm pretty sure that prior to that, I was thinking, this ain't going to work. I need to get out of this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not so sure I would have stayed sober. Matter of fact, I'm positive I would not have stayed sober if we would have went our different ways. But when she said that, that's when I knew things changed for both of us.
Yeah.
Um, I knew,
Huge,
yeah,
huge,
and
huge moment in
yeah,
our relationship. And it makes me think about, I talk with people all the time, and one lady in particular was going to move her sister in, who just coming out of prison, and help her get sober, but she didn't want to stop drinking.
yeah, never works.
So what I'm saying is, the sister went to prison for drugs and alcohol. She wants to move in with the sister, but the sister doesn't want to change her lifestyle. The sister and her husband do not want to stop drinking, and that is not a functioning situation. So when someone has to stop drinking, especially in the first, say, a year to 2 years of recovery, they cannot be around alcohol. And so it just it hurts my heart. It upsets me when I see these families pointing their finger at somebody in the family that needs to get sober. They need to get sober. I can think of another lady that I know who her daughter ended up committing suicide and
Well,
had a really strong problem with alcohol, but all the way until the day that the mom died, she didn't ever really catch on to the fact that her drinking was impacting the daughter's drinking.
well, because and it's because she couldn't understand that. Uh, I'll never forget the comment she made. She goes, "I don't know why she just doesn't quit. Just quit. Just quit."
And the people say
And
that all the
and
time. Why don't you
everybody
just
that
stop? Why don't you just stop? And they think it's like a moral, ethical, poor decision that you
Mhm.
can't just stop after two or three or whatever. And they don't comprehend
How bad it is.
the alcoholism. When alcoholism gets a hold of you, it's like when you have cancer. When you have cancer in your body and your cells are mutating and growing in a cancerous form, it takes medical intervention to stop it. Alcoholism is a progressive disease. For me, it started out one or two here and there, one or two here and there, social drinking, and then you get into a job where it's more heavy drinking, and that turns into four to six, and then it gets off the rails. It's a progressive disease, and so you don't necessarily have to have alcoholism in your genes or in your family to become an alcoholic.
Well, there's a lot of triggers, and the
Yes.
triggers are different for everybody.
Yes.
Everybody. There's just not one trigger. My trigger was I'm lonely. At the beginning before Tasha, that I was just lonely. I didn't. You know, I don't have any biological kids, and I was divorced. Well, I was divorced at that time for quite a while, but I was just lonely, so I'd go to the bar and hang out with my buddies who are good people. I don't want to look back and say that the people that I hung out with were well, they were triggers too, because the only way, the reason why I didn't feel lonely is because I could sit with them all week, talk about whatever. But y'all know this story that's ever been in bars. It's the same old story.
Yes, the same old stories.
It's funny how those same old
Because they're
stories are
stuck.
always funny until you stop drinking. you know, but it's just
I wanted to go back to something that you said, Darren, because you said one of the reasons why you fell in love with me was when you met my kids and decided I was a really good mother. Um, Somehow my kids turned out okay
they turned out great.
with all the mess that I
Yeah.
went through. But I needed someone to say to me, "You are not this mess that you're in." And that's who Darren was for me. Is he recognized that there was something good in me besides the mess that I had fallen into and created for myself, because it was definitely my fault too.
Well, and I've told you this. She reminded me of my mother. My mother would do absolutely. So I grew up. We were a poor family. Mom and dad, alcoholism, blah blah blah. They got divorced, and then dad disappeared, and then mom would work two, three jobs to make sure that I could go to baseball practice, and get me to baseball practice, but make sure I had cleats to wear or glove to use. She did whatever it took to make sure that we had what we needed to grow up. I mean, I don't want to say succeed. I want to say just to grow up or a chance of growing up. And that's what I saw in Tasha. That one, it's like I looked at these kids. I'm like, okay, she hasn't always been this alcoholic party girl, whatever she was thinking she
Praise the
was.
Lord.
I realized it right away because the kids, I was expecting to meet three kids that were quite frankly, I was expecting to meet that they're kind of screwed up, um, based on what I already knew of her at that time.
Because I was in a whole mess.
Yeah, she was a fire waiting to explode, which I was no different, but for other reasons. Um, and that's where I knew I was like, whatever that show was, wasn't the real thing. At the same time, I'm thinking to myself, well, I hate who I am. I already decided that a long time ago. But I was like, I knew I wasn't going to change um, without some type of intervention, if you will. I don't know. I don't know if I call it intervention. I needed something to motivate me to change. And like I said, my biggest problem up until we met was really dealing with depression. Um, I didn't really know that then. I knew that after. I was like, I was one depressed dude looking back. And I didn't know it at the time that I was a depressed guy. And,
And you had a lot of anxiety. And I think when you started your business,
mhm,
that you had more people to take care of. And I think that changed in you too, because when your mom passed away and you decided to go out on your own,
mhm.
you had more people. You had to stay clear minded, not only for you but for the people that were working for you.
Yeah, I did not, kind of going back to what I said the original AA meeting, everything that's bad happened to me, alcohol was involved in one way, shape, or form. I did not want to ever not be able to take care of whoever was working for me or whoever was relying on me or investing in me and come back and say, well, I was partying all night last night and I made a bad decision. I wouldn't have told them that exactly. But if that, I never wanted to make that the reason for something bad happening. Not saying that something bad can still can't happen, but
Sure.
it's not going to be because of alcohol.
Yeah.
And that I made that a sticking point. And as far as our relationship goes, I was like, if I fail the family or, fail my wife and my kids, I call them my kids now, and they're my stepchildren, but I call them my kids. Um, I don't care if they like it or not. I did not want to have alcohol be the reason why I failed them
Right.
for any purpose. And it's still the driving motivation in me today. And um, although I'll admit it's a lot easier today to not think about drinking, and I really don't, unless it's a real hot summer day in Texas, and a waitress walks by with a Modelo sitting on top of that. Whew, that's a tough one for
That's
me to
the
pass up.
weakness.
That's the weakness.
Once you get past a year, maybe 18 months, you really stop thinking about it. Don't you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, and I think it's different for everybody because I want to say after 90 days for me. I think I got past it real fast, and that might have been a function of starting my own company and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I was busy. I think if I was not busy and doing the same stuff, it would have been much, much harder. Um, uh, those are just choices. But I'll tell you one key thing that we haven't really talked about is we got involved with the church. We touched base on it, but when she got me going to the church, that really, really helped elevate life. I like to tell this story is one day, back in the drinking days and heavy drinking days, one Sunday morning, we wake up and turn the TV on, and Elevate Life has a, what do you call it, podcast, and they're live on TV or the internet or whatever. And so she gets it on the TV, and I'm watching Pastor Keith Craft. Don't know, never heard of him, never heard of Elevate Life. And I tell this story a lot, including to the pastor. I was like, I have no idea what he said that day. Absolutely zero idea. But I watched the whole thing, and I was in tears. I was bawling like a baby at the end of that. And to this day, I still have no idea what he said.
I
Uh,
think it's because it was conversation you'd never heard before.
yeah. Well, I wasn't involved. I don't. I
Well, you
wasn't a religious guy. I was spiritual. I believed that there was a God and all that stuff, but I wasn't a Catholic, a Baptist, or whatever.
but
Um,
you were raised Catholic.
I was raised Catholic, but that's a whole nother podcast too.
Yes.
Don't have anything bad. I don't care how anybody worships God, whether it's Catholic, Protestant, whatever. Insert name there. For me now, I think it's just important that you worship God and praise Him, and make Him one of the biggest parts of your life, if not the biggest, because I know that had a huge effect on me, um, getting to where I am right now.
I remember playing that in your apartment and being really, really glad that you were able to receive the message that day
Hmm.
because I had been in church. I didn't grow up going to church, but I always knew Jesus. My grandmothers sang to me and talked to me about Jesus when I was a little girl. So my testimony is not like, here was my life before Jesus and this was my life after Jesus, but my life, I was raised to be a good person, do the right thing. My parents were believers, but we didn't spend a lot of time in church because I think they had overspent time too much in church. So they didn't want to force us to go to church and things like that. And I even had a point in my life where I was kind of resentful about that for a little bit, but I got over it. So I have a story that goes like I was going along and my life was really great, and then it took a turn for the worst. And then when there were things that were going on around me that were really terrible, like my mom passed away, my dad went to prison, and things that I couldn't figure out how to handle, I went off the rails. And so my reaction
You kind of sound like a Johnny Cash song right now.
to I went off the rails and I took Jesus with me because I always believed in God, and I always, God never leaves us, and He was there with me even in my darkest days and even
Mhm.
in the messiest of my mess. And but I always knew when I needed to get out of it, and so
Mhm.
I walked into Elevate Life Church in 2005, right after my dad went to federal prison, and I just cried. I went through every Saturday night service for years
Mhm.
in tears. And I was so glad and so grateful that Darren was going to be open to that because I couldn't really get my other husbands to engage in the church in any way. And so that was
And
that
I
was definitely a critical.
and I'm pretty sure you told me that, so that might have been a little more. Well, I better at least give it a try because I don't want to be like them, right? Who wants to be like the other husbands, or
Well,
vice versa? But I also knew I needed something, and I just I was lost, and I was opened up. I was open to explore and or try just about anything. Uh, but again, she didn't drag me to church. I wanted to go after I watched that, on that Sunday morning.
yes. And one of the things, because I felt this way when you were talking about when you walked into the room of AA, when you were telling that story
Hmm.
earlier. Darren wants to be his best. And that is his character, and the qualities that make him who he is just top notch. And not everybody wants to do that. Like I want to improve myself, and I feel like, I've been in some really stupid seasons and some really messy seasons, but for the most part I want to be my best and have the best life that I can. And it's shocking to me that there are actually people that don't want to do that.
Well, I,
Darren is not one of those people.
I how do I
He
say this?
listens to me when I talk. He hears what I have to say, and he legitimately tries to be his best.
Yes.
And that's not a quality everybody has.
Well, but that and you're painting me like I'm.
It's true.
Well, yes. Thank you.
It is
It
true.
is, but trust me, there's a lot that's I'm still working on, and I think everybody does have that ability. Kind of slightly contradict you a little bit. Um, I just think everybody is afraid to try to find it, um, for whatever reasons, or they use. I when I hear excuses like I don't know how, um, I don't want to because. When I hear that stuff, I really tune it out because I used to use that stuff. You know, I can't do that. I don't have any money. I don't have any money. I can't do that. It might be one thing. I don't want to go to AA because I'll be embarrassed. I would use that. I don't want to go to church. That's where the nerds go. Just off the wall excuses and stuff. Because I think for me, I can tell you, for a long, long time, I was afraid to find out who I really was and how people might look at me. Well, I can tell you when I was in that bar every day for you know, 5 to 7 days a week for 10 plus years, what do you think people were it was kind of like a come to Jesus thought. Uh, Boy, the people from the outside must be, look at me real special. You know, well, there's that drunk. He's always here. A matter of fact, I'd hear that all the time. Someone come walk in for lunch and they'd point down in the corner where I would normally sit. And they'd say, yeah, that guy's always here. Every time I come here, he's here.
Really?
Yeah.
You heard people say that?
Oh, yeah. I heard people say that. And you know what? It didn't phase me.
You didn't care.
I
That's
just
just
didn't,
where you were.
I didn't care. But I used every excuse to stay there. I didn't want to find myself for whatever reason. Didn't know. And, it just finally, the apple fell from the tree and hit me in the head. I don't want to be this guy anymore.
Yeah.
And it was for many, many reasons. As we've talked about a few of them so
Yeah.
far.
When you finally get tired of being tired of being tired of being tired of going through the same
The other thing, the
cycles.
other thing about AA that taught me a lot is um, kind of like a bartender. If you ever had a job as a bartender or even a waitress or something, waiter or waitress, something like that, you learn to deal with all walks of life, the richest, the poorest, the youngest, the oldest, and everything in between. Well, AA, guess what you see when you walk in there? All walks of life, the richest, the poorest, the hardcore, every kind of holic you can think. Every kind of addictions you can think, whether it was drugs, uh, baby doll named off quite a few of them, and you all know what they are. But what was great about the AA thing, it was all people, for the most part, that wanted to help themselves. And that's what I thought the great thing about AA was. You know, there was people in there that tried 18 times to quit drinking. Uh, they kept coming back because they didn't give up. There was people in there that just tried once or twice. There's people that were 30 years sober in there. There were people in there who were 1 day sober. Some cases probably 3 minutes. But it was, but
And some of them not yet.
yeah, and some of them, yeah, they needed another 3 hours to get sober. But it was a cool thing for me because it was all walks of life, and they all had one interest: getting themselves better, and ultimately they would help each other, and that was the cool part, the helping each other part.
So
You
one of
know,
the reasons why I started this, Darren, is because when I walked into the rooms of AA, I thought to myself, where has this been all my life?
Mhm.
Because everybody in there has got a very similar story. And I thought if I could just open up a space for people to talk about their stuff and their junk and get rid of the shame around it, because that's shame is one of the reasons that keeps people from going to a treatment center.
Oh,
This
big
is
time.
something that people say all the time. I don't have time to stop and go to a treatment center. You don't have time not to. I don't have time to go to AA. I'm not going to make time for that. You can't afford to not make time for that. But also doing this, doing these lives, doing these podcasts gives people a way to listen in their car, driving to work,
Mhm.
driving home from work, driving while you're sitting watching, watching your kids do sports and you're sitting in the car waiting for them to be done. So I just thought it would be so great to just tell these stories like you hear in AA.
Mhm.
Because it doesn't matter if you're in AA or Celebrate Recovery or a treatment center or a counselor. I did all of the things. I started in 2013 with a treatment center. Well, I started with AA, then I went to a treatment center, but I did everything I could to get sober.
Yeah, questions I get a lot are which one's better? Which one did you like better? Which one you like? What's the best one?
Mhm.
And my simple answer is what works, whatever works for you. Everybody has a different menu, has a different flavor, you know, and if one is not working for you, don't quit or don't give up on yourself. Is what I tell them. I said, don't give up on yourself. Find something else
Yes.
because there's a lot of, especially these days now and age. I never thought I'd ever be on what's this called, a podcast. I never thought I'd be on one. Um, but it works for a lot of people. So I hear,
AA is effective.
yeah.
Celebrate Recovery is effective.
Oh, I know what I
And
want to say.
yes.
Start with the church. I start with the church. Because starting with the church and with God will help guide you to any direction that you want to go.
Yes. When you go into the rooms of AA, they talk about your higher power.
Yep.
And so AA essentially it is 12 steps that actually come out of the Bible. And some people don't really realize that, but it is actually information that is in the Bible too. And it's going to redirect you back to your higher power, which mine is God. Um, but also, you know, I think what you're saying too, Darren, is we have to take ownership of our recovery.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what I tell people you have to do first, because you can't get sober for your husband, your wife, your kids. Unfortunately, it's very sad, but you can't get sober for anyone else. You have to get 100% in charge and responsible for your recovery.
And
You
by
have
the
to
way,
decide.
can I
Yeah.
interject something? And it doesn't matter whether you're married or single or going through divorce or going through the worst time of your life for whatever reasons. Everybody's at different stages in your life. So back to what you were just saying.
Well, and if you're not the person that's trying to get sober and you're a family member or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or, something like that, are you willing to stop drinking for their sobriety?
That's a good question. And
Because that is powerful.
yes, and um, I had a loss for words. You
Well,
believe that?
at the end of the day, alcohol does nothing for you. It's so commonplace. It's so involved with business. It's
Oh,
so involved with everyday things.
that reminds me. So I was on Twitter or TikTok. Yes, I get on TikTok, believe it or not. And I don't know which one, but it was the other day, and someone made a comment about alcohol, and it was and I hope I say this correctly, but it was to the point where, you know, if alcohol is the biggest depressant and causes all these problems, why is it uh, advertised as a celebration? And if you think about that, you watch, if you're a sports fan, you're watching sports, you could just be watching randomly TV and a commercial comes out. It's a Budweiser commercial and everybody's having fun at a bar and the most beautiful women and men are all there and everybody's having fun and life is great.
Yeah. No.
You don't see the flip side of that. Never. And you never will.
The
Yeah.
hangovers,
Here's the Alka Seltzer and, oh, by the way, and the alcohol state, you know, being an alcoholic, I know this, having the bottle of vodka sitting next to your dresser for the next morning with some Tylenol, of course.
so my alcoholism got so bad that I had to drink in the middle of the night.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
it
didn't,
was
I
really
didn't, I
bad.
didn't have to drink in the middle of the night, but um, I watched her do it.
I had the shakes, the
And,
tremors,
uh,
the panic attacks, the anxiety, the full blown, all of it
but
was terrifying.
usually I remember most Sunday mornings, the bar opened up at 11 o'clock, and I promise I was at the bar a lot of Sundays at 10:58 because I couldn't wait to get a drink in
In
me
the
and
Uber
stop the
at
shakes.
10:30.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to end with this funny story, Darren. You had a chair that was from the Frisco bar it was on his balcony
at the
and
apartment.
at the apartment. This was going back several years. And I come over and I go bouncing through the apartment and I go and I find Darren with his head in his hands, with his knees on his, his elbows on his knees. And I thought somebody died. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened?
Sitting in the chair.
Yes, he's sitting in the Frisco bar chair. And I say, what's wrong? He stands up and he looks across out into the wild blue yonder from the balcony and says, with tears in his eyes, they're closing the Frisco bar.
They were moving it.
They were only moving it.
But they had to be temporary closed for, I don't know, a couple months or something. And ironically, that's about when we stopped drinking.
It was. So
Yeah.
thank you. What's his name? Tony.
Tony.
Thank you
God- yeah. Thank you for closing.
moving, relocating the bar.
Yeah. And shout out to Tony. He owns the Frisco Bar, but he was a big supporter and still is to this day of not drinking.
Of your sobriety. Yes,
Yeah.
there's been many people from the Frisco bar say, I'm very proud of you, Darren. Don't come back.
Matter of fact, I think the staff's on orders not to serve me.
So let's wrap it up for today, and we'll have a part 3 because there's something else I want to talk about. But thank you for joining us. Please follow me at babydollmartin.com. You can go onto that website and click on Sober from the menu and get into my calendar and schedule a discovery call. So we want to help you get sober. We want to help you if you're an enabler and you have people in your family that are drinking. So thanks for being on with me, Darren. Thank you for your stories.
It's a privilege.
And we are praying
I wish
for
everyone
you.
the best of luck for sure.
And we hope you can sober up.
Amen.